Support for Arkansas Week provided by the Arkansas Democrat-Gazette, the Arkansas Times, and Little Rock Public Radio.
And hello again, everyone, and thanks very much for being with us. It's crucial to the conduct of not only the crop and livestock industries, but nutrition programs in urban areas as well. It goes by the simplest template, Farm Bill, but it is a quite complex piece of legislation, almost as complex as the negotiations that produced the final version. In a few moments, the Farm Bill that is taking shape now and the role being played by the senior senator from Arkansas. But first, Arkansas legislators will meet in special session next week, summoned by a governor who had no choice but to summon them. There is a wildlife budget dangling, yeah, but the administration will also seek still more tax cuts, big ones. And that matter of one of the party's primaries, all of that now with old friends and political consultants, Bill Vickery from the right, Michael Cook from the left. And thanks to everybody for coming in. Well, surpluses are just appearing left and right. I mean, they're almost into the hundreds of millions of dollars. Well, in fact, they are. Bill?
You know, I do think this tax cutting issue, there is a long-term game to this. There is a purpose for this. And when you look where the state's situated, you look at the growth of the states over the last 10 years, Texas, Florida, Tennessee, a number of others that have either low tax burden or no state tax, income tax, that it is an attractive tool to point out that at some point in time, I think Arkansas is going to get to the point that we'll have relatively low tax levels about across the board, both income, property, at all.
Corporate.
And that makes it attractive for business to locate there. And so I do think there is a sound end game here. I think it's also just nice to have a little more money in your pocket when we head into the type of economy that we're heading into.
Michael Cook.
To me, this is an example of how the Republican Party and Sarah Sanders continues to sort of stick it to the working class and middle class Arkansans. And here's how. This tax proposal is going to be just for the wealthy. If you're a school teacher who makes $50,000 a year, you're going to get an extra $11 a month based on this tax cut. If you make $1 million a year, you're going to get $5,000 extra a year in your pocket. So that's one example of how these tax cuts are geared toward the wealthy. I do agree with Bill in that people need to have more money in their own pocket. So these tax cuts should be geared just toward working class and middle class folks. But sadly, the Republican Party just wants to give the rich folks a bigger tax cuts.
Well, Bill and advocates of the administration's programs, as does Bill, we're playing the long game here.
Well, the long game is, right now the economy is pretty good in Arkansas and nationally, but there's going to be some long-term problems. Sarah Sanders has said she wants to completely eliminate the income tax, which is half the budget of the state. And we still don't know how many tens, if not hundreds of millions that Arkansas Learns is going to cost the budget. So right now, heading into the election year, Republicans get to talk about how we cut taxes, forgetting that it's only for the wealthy folks. But then the bill's going to come due in a few years once Arkansas Learns gets going, and more budget cuts must have to come.
Yeah, Bill, valid argument.
Yeah, but I mean, reality behind that is if you earn more, you pay more. So consequently, the tax cut's going to affect you more. If what you earn, it's relative to your income. I mean, that's why we have a graduated income tax. That's why it takes a percentage of our income. When you look at, again, I would just point to the successes that have occurred throughout the country. You look at where people have fled, Illinois, New York, California, where they're going, Texas, Tennessee, Florida. These are states that are exploding in growth. And by the way, their budgets have no problem keeping up with all this because the people are moving there. So they expand the base. I think there is a good, sound, long-term strategy here. And at the end of the day, this is actually the money that belongs to the people themselves. I mean, philosophically, this is your money, my money, your money. It's not the government's money first. And so I like at least the notion of putting that out there to top the list. So.
All right, all right, Michael.
Well, the key thing is, yes, when you make more, you pay more. However, when you tell somebody who's making only $50,000 a year that your tax cut is only $130, but the millionaire in the fancy neighborhood on Chenal gets a $5,000 tax cut. That doesn't feel that great when you're only getting $130 in tax relief.
All right. In the interim, Bill, the pushback certainly from some elements of the education community and the human services establishment. Hey, wait a minute, we could use this money here now.
Yeah, listen,
and that's an investment as well. They are.
I do appreciate that, but when you look consistently across the board where we have ranked over a long period of time near the bottom of a wide variety of lists, we've got to stop clinging to the bottom rung of the ladder. We've got to try some things to move the state forward. Now more than ever, the opportunity exists to do that. And so I applaud the administration, I applaud the legislature for attempting to do that. And look, LEARN's is a great example of that. You're going to pay teachers more and you're going to give people true education freedom of choice. And I think that will have a dramatic impact. It's also yet another reason to lure people to the state of Arkansas. So,
Michael.
I certainly don't agree. You know, when it comes to innovation, just cutting taxes is not particularly inventive. Why don't we do something like give tax credits to businesses that offer paid maternity leave? You know, using that surplus to, you know, put more money in people's pockets by helping businesses provide paid maternity leave to new parents. That's one way we can give people more money and then do something innovative instead of just cutting taxes for the rich folks.
Okay. The game and fish budget. Well, we got to pass a game and fish budget, and we're going to do it. But how much haggling, Bill?
Well, no, listen, we're going to have a special session in the legislature. We're going to go in and driven mostly by the fact that we don't have a budget for the Game and Fish Commission. This is politics 101 here. You've got some folks who have had their stinger out for the Game and Fish Commission for a while. Opportunity to maybe send a signal or two. But at the end of the day, we're going to pass a budget. I know the director, there was some a pay increase that I think is going to be pared way back. We'll meet, we'll cut taxes, and we'll pass a game and fish budget.
Yeah. Any thoughts, Michael?
It's just a mess. We're going to spend all this money on the special session when it'd probably been cheaper just to do the budget and give the raises in the very first go round.
Okay. Well, the administration got, I can fairly call it a gift. The prosecuting attorney for Pulaski and Perry counties has decided no, there's no basis for a criminal action as vis-a-vis the lectern matter. Bill, it's got to be good news for you.
Listen, it never was anything. It's not anything. It's never going to be anything. The reality is that these audits, most of them are forwarded on to the prosecutor's office. Will Jones is a smart guy, good prosecutor, long-time career prosecutor. This isn't some political person who swooped in out of the blue, spent a lot of time in that office. You know these things. At the end of the day, I think this is what the administration said it really was. You had just basically an administrative foul-up. And so moving on, I mean, again, as I said, that wasn't anything, isn't anything, not going to be anything.
For her opponents, Michael, you would have to concede it does make it difficult to keep this thing going.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of prosecuting, I think Will Jones made I hate to say he made the right call. This is not particularly a prosecutable offense. It was, a complete waste of money and a complete fiasco because of the Sanders administration just blatant incompetence and trying to be cute and moving things around and not telling the whole story. But just sort of an example of they're the gang that can't shoot straight. This whole lectern thing. So in terms of long term, are we going to be talking about a year from now? No, but it just creates paints a picture of Sarah Sanders and her administration that's not particularly competent or effective.
Both parties had their state conventions in the past several days. Bill, did Governor Sanders suffer a setback in that in terms of her duly appointed state chair?
The chair of the Republican
lost
Party.
His position as head of the convention.
What you're referring to is the fact that a cadre of Republican Party members came in, took over the convention, and voted to have a closed primary, which means you have to register for that party before you go in. Look, I don't think this is a reflection on the governor. And to these folks' credit that did this, to my knowledge and my understanding, they did it fair and square. They followed the rules and came in and won. And so difficult to be critical of them. I do think, let's say what this really is. It's a power grab. Okay, sometimes those are done for altruistic reasons and good. Sometimes they're done because people want to employ a purity test for the candidates or whatever it might be. But it's a power grab, pure and simple. I don't think this is a case of the revolution coming back to eat itself. This isn't kind of Robespierre to the guillotine or anything like that. As much as this is what happens when you have a dominant party that all the fights occur internally. I think this is going to be dealt with. I think that we're going to continue to have robust Republican primaries. I do worry about this, though, one thing. If it does indeed become a closed primary, the parties pay for that themselves. And so it's a drain on party resources. So for all the very much so. For all the ideological back and forth, this ultimately could have a real effect on the Republican Party.
Before we go to Michael, you say they follow the rules. That is in dispute, isn't it?
Well, I think they followed the rules in how they took over the convention. How they then implemented their the vote for a closed primary, I think, is probably going to be litigated and dealt with going forward. But you can't. I mean, you can't fault the folks for what they did in taking over the convention. It seems as though they did it fair and square.
Well, litigation, but also legislation. Are we not true? That's going to.
Yeah, I mean, to me, that just another example of how the Republican Party has gone off the deep end. I think, of course, Bill will know more about Republican Party politics than I ever will. But from the outside looking in, it seems like some activists are just infuriated that there are Republican elected officials who have the audacity to believe that Joe Biden won the election, that they believe that the January 6th was an insurrection. They're still conservative, but they're not complete MAGA, and I think this is an example of how they're just trying to make their party even more MAGA. But one thing I'll add, though, if they do close their primary, okay, fine. But they should pay for it themselves and not the state.
But there is also a tactical aspect to this in terms of closing the primary to some voters who might want to wander over it.
It's a mistake.
The capacity for mischief there is manifest.
I do. Go ahead.
It's funny. It is a political mistake because people are going to show up on primary election day and say, "Oh, sorry, if you're not a registered voter for the Republicans, you can't vote in our primary." Okay, well, I'll go vote in the Democratic primary, and so you close off your own primary, or maybe just not. Our primary voting is low. We only have like 20% turnout.
Yeah.
It's ridiculously low. So in the long term, they may be. Well, two things I think will happen. I think it hurts themselves long term, and then second of all, I think if they do close it up, you'll see the move to have what they call the jungle primary, put that on the ballot where everybody runs at the same time.
Yeah. I don't see that. Look, I think this is, again.
Don't see what, Michael?
I don't see the jungle primary happening. Okay. I don't see that coming to bear. The reality is you can have same-day registration. There are a number of issues to go along to surround this that won't create the kind of disaster scenario that we're talking about. But I do want to go back to the point. The party has to pay for it themselves, and so that becomes the big practical issue. Again, we can talk about a litmus test, a purity test for candidates, and all this other stuff. And again, I will restate: this isn't Robespierre to the guillotine. The revolution hasn't turned on itself. But there is something that has to be dealt with here, and that is the financial impact of this on the party. That has a real impact on the candidates that then run in general election races.
Yeah, Michael, your side had a party convention too.
We had a great, well-organized. They had two conventions. They had the what's called the Special State Convention, where they elected delegates to the Democratic National Convention in Chicago, and then they had their regular biennial state convention. Both well-organized, both Democrats coming together talking about their vision for a stronger, bolder Arkansas. So unlike usually the opposite. Usually it's Democrats that are not particularly organized, but Republicans were the ones who completely disrespected the governor's pick for chairman, but Democrats, had their act together.
Yeah. Was there any kind of consensus that came out of it other than, we're going to try hard? I mean, it was a theme.
The theme in terms of, fighting for public education to keep, fighting against the Arkansas Learns Act, which is basically going to help rich families go to private schools and then leave rural kids in rural areas completely in the dark and just gutting a public education. In terms of targeted tax cuts for working and middle-class folks. So a lot of good things that came out of this convention, and Democrats are fired up and ready to fight this.
Got to be fair, Bill.
I was going to say, to give them credit, they filed out of that phone booth in a very orderly fashion. So all 9 of them.
I got to end it there because we're simply out of time. Come back soon. I know you will. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
And we'll be back in just a moment. With the House controlled by one party and the Senate by another, you could expect a delay in the final version of a new farm bill, and a delay now seems almost certain. It is, after all, an election year, so we won't have a vote in all likelihood until after November. Since the current statute expires at summer's end, and since essentially every member of Congress has a stake of one sort or another in the farm bill, and since only about $1.5 trillion is involved, an extension of the current law would seem to be absolutely assured. The ranking Republican member of the Senate Ag Committee is, of course, John Boozman of Arkansas, who has advocated for, as he put it, more farm in the farm bill. Well, here to go over that and other aspects of the debate is farm economist Dr. Hunter Biram of the UA's Agriculture Extension Service. Dr. Biram, thank you for coming in. Where are we here?
Where are we? Well, we now have 3 proposals for the Farm Bill. May 1st, Debbie Stabenow, who's chairwoman of Senate Ag, came out with her version. And then in May 17th, Glenn Thompson, who's chair of House Ag, came out with his. And then just this Tuesday, Senator Boozman, our senior senator here from Arkansas, came out with his version. So we got 3 proposals and a lot to go into between the 3.
Well, let's start with the upper chamber, because the gentleman from Arkansas seems to suggest that the distance between his bill and the chairman's or the chair's is not that great. Do you concur with that? You agree?
I think that there are some key differences between, say, Title I, which is the commodity title. I think that Senator Boozman's proposal offers a stronger safety net for producers. So with the potential of the increases to the reference prices of 15% on the average, the chairwoman's is 5%, and that was only for a few notable crops. Senator Boozman's actually calls for an increase in the prices for all the crops, as well as increases to the effective reference price via the price escalator. So I would say in that regard, there are some key differences. But
wait, you've lost some of us city slickers when you talk about the reference price. I think I know what it is, but
sure. So a reference price. Some people who have been doing,
but it's key to the bill.
It is key to the bill. People who have done ag policy work for a long time know them as maybe a target price and maybe target price deficiency payments historically. So pretty much it's this price that sets a guaranteed level of farm income depending on the crop, depending on crop yields as well. But it's all about stabilizing farm income, providing risk management in a time of intense price volatility.
It's essentially, would I be correct in saying it's a trigger?
It is. It could be. It could be trigger, but it also is a trigger, I guess is one way you could think about it.
The differences between in the rival Senate versions, are they reconcilable easily? How much storm and drawing are we going to have to go through?
That's a good question. I think the biggest differences that I've seen, at least, are going to be with Title I. So if we can find reconciliation with Title I, then I think the path forward is more clear, because there are more similarities, I think, between the other titles. But with Title I, that's going to be where the most work is going to need to be done. Okay,
now the House version has to be taken into consideration, obviously, as well. You got to have 2 chambers colliding here.
So we do need to consider the House, and the House, actually, amazingly enough, within 7 days, they sent their version to markup in the committee, and it passed out of markup, which is encouraging, certainly encouraging. But as you said, we have to reconcile that House version with the Senate version. In the Senate version, there has to be reconciliation here. Now, will there be big differences between what's going on in the House and the Senate currently as it stands? Well, fortunately, on the House side, the House version and Senator Boozman's version are very similar, which could prove to be show an encouraging path forward between the 2 chambers.
Yeah, are we talking incremental shifts here in the language or in the dynamics of the Farm Bill? Are we talking about, and looking at all of them in the aggregate or individually, the 3 versions, are we talking about major shifts in the Farm Bill or just incremental?
Compared to the current Farm Bill?
Yeah.
Compared to the current Farm Bill, the way that I want to think about this is, from the 18 to the 14 Farm Bill, we saw huge shifts, right? So we went away with direct payments. We went away with the countercyclical program from 18 to 14, introduced ARC and PLC. Those were the biggest shifts. Now, what we've seen since 14 is 14, we had ARC and PLC, agricultural risk coverage, price loss coverage. We had ARC and PLC. 2018, we also had ARC and PLC. And the next Farm Bill, Arkan PLC. So the changes that are going to happen, I think, are more incremental. Like it could be a coverage level, it could be a price that changes, but the overall mechanics between the two types of farm bills are going to be the same.
Yeah. To what degree this year, or in the current debate over a farm bill, is there an ideological cast to this debate that was not necessarily there in previous versions?
Could you maybe help me understand?
Yeah, well,
more
I
of
mean,
what
in
you're
terms,
asking?
we have for environmental regulations, you know, are bigger than ever part, as we understand in the farm
Yes.
bill. You have the climate debate, which is filtered into to the farm bill.
That's right. So whenever you mention that, I think about Inflation Reduction Act. So that
Tax policy.
Yep. So with the new farm bill, the plan is for spending authorized under the Inflation Reduction Act actually to be placed into the farm bill with for permanent spending. So it's to shift dollars that are unobligated in the Inflation Reduction Act for agricultural conservation practices, shift that money out of IRA and into the farm bill, which is different. I think not vastly different, but I do think there's a bigger emphasis on conservation and climate smart practices in this farm bill than recent
The
ones.
gentleman from Arkansas was talking about putting more farm in the farm bill. How do you read that? I mean, more rural than urban, is that a way to put it, or what?
I think that's one way that we can think about that, because what are we seeing? We're seeing that the population is becoming more and more urban and less rural. I don't know what the latest stat is, but I think it's safe to say that less than 2% of the entire population is directly involved in agriculture. So rural America, the populations are shrinking. What does that mean? That means that they're becoming more smaller districts in terms of representation in D.C. So we are seeing more urban representation in D.C. So what does that mean for the farm bill? That means more emphasis is going to be placed on SNAP funding, the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, formerly known as food stamps. And so more emphasis will be placed on SNAP, given that we have this more urban Congress. Now, what does that mean, more farm in the farm bill? What he's saying is we now have, at least from the last CBO, Congressional Budget Office scoring, we have, 79% of the mandatory spending going towards SNAP programs. So that leaves what, 21% for everything else, which is a lot of different investments.
Well, I mean, let's round it up to 80% if we
Might as well.
Yeah.
Sure.
Well, all right, but this is urban America has an enormous stake in the farm bill. People who never go near sod or a steer rely on the farm bill.
Indeed they do, and I think anymore to get a farm bill passed, you've got to have SNAP and these farm programs in the same bill. I think to get a farm bill passed, you got to keep these two funding priorities together, and I think that's what allows us to continue to have a farm bill. So from the urban side, you know, SNAP is in there, but also think about this for a farmer to be able to stabilize their income with these programs that I mentioned earlier. If they can stabilize their income, we can continue to have a safe, affordable, and abundant food supply, which makes our food cheap. And we like cheap food. I mean, out of the whole world, we spend the smallest amount of our disposable income on food. And that's good news. So from the SNAP side and from the Production Act side, I think that it's a win-win for the consumer.
Yeah, well, and by urban America, we're talking about not necessarily New York City, but Newport, Arkansas. I mean, downtown Newport, not in the farm field.
Sure, absolutely.
But the farm bill is just one aspect. Let's shift gears just slightly. Farm bill is just one aspect of the challenges facing rural America, rural Arkansas, as it becomes greater, more and more urbanized. And Mr. Boozman, I know, has spoken to this, but you've got challenges to healthcare, education, providing those services, particularly at the county level, where counties are rapidly losing, those counties that are rapidly losing population. The Farm Bill doesn't address that specifically, but it's there. It hangs over the entire debate, does it not?
That's right, because if we're going to continue to invest in our rural communities, we've got to invest in agriculture and agricultural production. We've got to invest in broadband, which that's going to be in there as well. So we've got to invest in services and invest in industries that are more likely to be in these rural areas, so that we can continue to feed the world, but also we might want to keep these people that are leaving the farm and leaving the rural communities. We might want them to come back to these communities to continue to serve their communities and service them, and maybe they don't have to leave the farm, and maybe they don't have to leave their small hometown and go to the big city. So providing opportunities for that is certainly going to be prioritized.
Thanks very much for coming in.
Thank you.
Thanks for bringing us up to
It's been an
date,
honor.
and come back soon.
Yes, sir, absolutely.
That does it for us for this week. As always, we thank you for watching, and we'll see you next week.
Support for Arkansas Week provided by the Arkansas Democrat Gazette, the Arkansas Times, and Little Rock Public Radio.